Okay, thank you. So we're reconvening City of Philomath Planning Commission public hearing on PC 21-12 for major modification of the Millpond Crossing original subdivision approval. And now we've reached the time for public testimony in favor of the applicant. Before you make your comments, please provide your name and city or area that you live in. I believe we're not providing address anymore. So are there, is there public testimony in favor?
I had two. I had first Marie Davis, and I believe she's in the next room. So let me hop over there real quick. Unless she's up, she's good.
There she is.
Marie, if you want to go ahead and unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good evening. My name is Marie Davis. I am here tonight as a homeowner and resident of Phase 1 in Millpond Crossing. I have also been an employee of Levi Miller since about 7 months after purchasing my home. My husband and I have 3 children. We spent years searching the Philomath area for homes we could afford for our family, and we lost every offer to higher, often full cash bids. The options we were left facing were to continue to rent a townhome on a busy street with no yard for our kids, paying over $2,000 a month to rent a house, which we could in no way afford, or try to purchase a home in an even lower price bracket than we previously tried, which would require thousands of dollars in upgrades or repairs, which again we could not afford, but would allow us to put in offers well above asking price, which is what homes are selling for. Then Millpond Crossing was approved. The possibility of owning a new home bigger than the homes in our budget that we had been looking at, with a spacious yard, within walking distance to our kids' schools, and with a mortgage nearly the same as our previous rent, was something we thought we would never have. But thanks to Levi, we now do. We bought in Phase 1. I have worked for Levi for the past year. I am in a unique position to be able to see all of the effort and the struggles behind the scenes. I know there have been issues. I have experienced some myself as a homeowner, and I have helped address some as an employee. But I know that Levi's heart is in the right place, and he truly wants to help families in this community. This development has changed my family's lives. We are forever grateful, and we hope that many more families will be given the same opportunity for affordable home ownership and join us as neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Workman.
And then we also have Daniel, I believe it's Sidor or Sitter.
Yes, thank you, commissioners. My name is Daniel Sitter, and I'm representing Benton Habitat for Humanity this evening. And we are here to say that we're offering our support for Millpond Crossing, the major subdivision modification. As advocates for affordable homeownership, we are in support of this modification to allow for higher density and more variety of housing options in the city of Philomath. As we noted in our letter of support, our staff has been in communication with Levi and are currently vetting partnership opportunities. We're excited to explore these opportunities with our board and really with Millpond Crossing to keep these homes affordable, hardworking, and low to middle income households in our community. Levi's been very receptive to all the ideas that we've brought forward. We're still kind of working out what it will look like and what the end result will be. But Levi has been very open and honest with us through this whole process. So we've really looking forward to really seeing what partnership opportunities this can bring up. So we're really thankful for the city of Philomath for really being leaders in affordable housing across the region, and do encourage you to approve this subdivision approval to bring those townhomes and higher density and more home ownership opportunities for residents in Philomath and Benton County.
Thank you. Are there any questions for either of those providing testimony in favor? Okay. Oh, Commissioner Yoder.
Thank you. Just a real quick one for Marie. She mentioned, I don't know if she's still there or not, but she mentioned, oh, there you are. You mentioned that all the different places that you were looking at before you found and you wound up on 15th Street. You looked at some townhomes, but you did not want a townhome. You wanted a place with a yard. Did I hear that correctly?
No, we were renting a townhome. This particular townhome did not have a yard.
Okay, and you were specifically looking for a yard, and these townhomes would have at least somewhat of a yard in the back.
You'll have to ask Levi the specifics of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Does anyone in opposition to the application which wish to speak?
So Chair Connor, we didn't have anybody sign up. We did have one email that came in. It came in after the 12 o'clock cutoff time. But just with hybrid meetings and digital meetings, we went ahead and forwarded that on to the planning commissioners. We can include that in the formal record, which would be my recommendation, just noting the time in the record. But that did go out. That was an email from Trevor Kramer, I believe a current resident there, and all the commissioners were given a copy of that email. But it would be nice to get some direction, whether the commission feels appropriate to go ahead and include it with that caveat or to exclude it from the actual record of this hearing.
Looks like our city attorney would like to weigh in on that. Oh, you're muted. No.
Let's try now.
There you go.
Okay.
Yep.
The flipping of the mic sometimes will make it upset. So my suggestion would be with that, I have not received this email. I don't have a copy of it. I don't know if receiving the email and reading it has influenced the commissioners, any of the commissioners in one way or the other in terms of how they would like to decide in this case. I think that if commissioners feel influenced by this, then it should be part of the record. But if commissioners feel like they can make an impartial decision, having read this email, if they have, then it's okay not to put it in. I would also recommend that it does go in just because it's gone out, and it seems like most people have read it, but that's up to the commission at this point.
Yeah, Commissioner Hunsiker. You muted.
I've not seen the email. Is it really long? I mean, could somebody read it? Or
It's not really long.
No, not terribly.
I mean, if the idea is
I can
put it
read
in the
it.
record, at least I'd like to know what it says, I guess.
I can pull it up on the screen. That might save some time, Chair Connor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Get it on the right screen. Okay.
We okay with, Commissioner Green, did you have something before?
Is this the email that came out like in the last day or two, or the one from, I just have one in my packet from a Lori that kind of has pros and cons.
Yeah, this came out, I have Lori down as a neutral party more because it was
Okay.
kind of
'Cause she
neutral.
gave
This
both.
is one
Okay,
that
that makes
came
sense.
out. This one just got emailed out late this afternoon, like
Yeah.
maybe 4 o'clock or so.
Okay, thanks.
I'm,
Let's see. Let me,
yeah, Peggy, if you want to read that, I'm fine with that. And can you increase the font size there, Chris?
well, I had it nice big and then it deleted them. There you go.
There we go.
Okay. Good afternoon. And this is from Trevor Kramer. As some of you may recall, I spoke at the city council meeting in August regarding the ditch running through our backyards at Timothy Street and Millpond Crossing. As I imagine some of you are aware, there has been no appreciable progress made in this issue, despite the fact that the builder's representation assured us in May that the project would be complete by June 18th. With the current proposal for changes to the upcoming phases of Millpond Crossing, I wanted to again bring to your attention the ongoing issues that members of this community continue to face, issues that have yet to be addressed meaningful by the builder. It has been made clear to me by some members of the council in the past that they do not feel there is much that can be done by the city government, but it feels like there is an opportunity at this juncture. I will not pretend to know the intricacies of these types of approvals, but I would ask, if at all possible, that the city make any future approval of Levi Miller's plans contingent upon him resolving the litany of problems still standing from the previous phases. I would also like to point out that prior to the last few weeks, Mr. Miller has been a very difficult man to get a hold of. It certainly seems convenient that he suddenly is willing to speak to residents right as he needs to ask for city approval again. My concern is that once the updated plans are approved, Mr. Miller will continue his pattern of non-communication, and we will once again be left to wait and guess. Unfortunately, I'm unable to make tonight's meeting, and I have missed the window to submit written comment. With that said, I would like to point out that I was choosing to hold off on reaching out to the council until after my meeting with Mr. Miller, which was scheduled for noon today. Unfortunately, Mr. Miller could not be bothered to show up, which has added to my frustration. Thanks for your time as usual. I would also like to thank Chris Workman and Kevin Fear for their continued work on all of this. Thanks to the lack of transparency and communication from the builder's side, they have been the only research we have had available for updated information. Best, Trevor.
Thanks, Peggy.
You're welcome.
Is there any neutral testimony?
So in the packet, there was one email that was received that was just noted. And I'll apologize, I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe that the name was provided on the email.
Lori McGraw.
Yeah, thank you, Lori. That was provided in the packet for this evening's hearing.
Yes.
And then I would just note, I don't see the kind of separate for public bodies, but I will note Gordon Kurtz from Benton County is here.
Yeah. He has his hand up.
Maybe gives him an opportunity.
Mr. Kurtz.
Advisor first, I suppose. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
Thank you, commissioners, for hearing me this evening, and thanks to Chris and Kevin, Chris Workman and Kevin Fear for their help and cooperation through this whole process. I don't have a lot to add to what has already been covered in the staff report, other than my thanks to Chris for including our conditions at the tail end. And the last 6 of those items on the conditions of approval are those that the county is principally concerned about. As you probably are aware, 95% of this project is inside the city of Philomath, and a very small fraction of it affects the county. But because we are the jurisdiction through which all drainages pass and on their way to the Schroyer property, we have very distinct water quality concerns about drainage from the site. And as I've noted in our conditions, the site is currently out of compliance with its DEQ 1200C permit, and it's also out of compliance with its Benton County Erosion and Sediment Control permit. The applicant was fined by DEQ in December, and that was not a small fine. It was in the $9,000 range for noncompliance. In working with the applicant, we went through an enforcement process at the beginning of last year, and the applicant worked with us to try and bring the site into compliance. And at that time, it was agreed that we would have to sort of reapply for our erosion and sediment control permits. And unfortunately, we have not received those reapplications yet. And the site remains, as I mentioned, it has fallen back into non-compliance over the course of the last year. So the county is preparing a letter of non-compliance for the site, and we would prefer to work with the applicant to resolve these issues than to go to any kind of enforcement action. It's in everybody's best interest to cooperate and find some compromise. But I think if, that last condition in the list of conditions is critically important to this project moving forward, because we've got to bring the site to the point where it's ready to move forward before we go any further. And I think that's pretty much the gamut of what I have to offer at this point in time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Kurtz? I've got one. Do those concerns include safety concerns for the very tall vertical face cuts on the piles of gravel?
That's one of them, yes. Primarily, I'm going to back up a little bit. Really, those vertical face cuts are more an OSHA issue than they are an erosion and sediment control issue. But it is conceivable that one of those could collapse in a dense rainstorm and create a wash of mud that could then enter the north ditch, overwash, Chapel Drive. That's kind of worst case scenario. But the real truth is that what we strive for in these construction sites is for no turbidity to leave the site. You can walk down to the Marys and see it runs chocolate brown in the wintertime as it is, and that's predominantly due to forest practices and agricultural work and stuff like that. We try to keep as much of the construction waste out as we possibly can, and there are pretty strict rules about that. And the site needs to be brought into compliance. So.
Is there any role for the city or the county with regard to that safety issue? I've been concerned that a child with a stick could bury themselves after 2 minutes of effort.
It would probably be wise. This is how I would address it personally. Again, this is inside the city limits, and I'm speaking from a county perspective, and so I'm way out of my jurisdiction here. But I would have construction fence at minimum around it, so that to prevent someone would have to be very determined to get past it, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
In truth, it is an OSHA concern. It's an occupational health and safety issue for those who are working there, or those who are working around the piles, or those who would have to move the piles come the time that that the site was being prepared for further development. And earthwork is tricky. It's very, very difficult to determine what soil is going to do, especially soil that's been disturbed and then reconsolidated and then compacted. It's not a good idea to count on it staying where it's going to be, where it was left. So
it's not going to stand like that forever, regardless what happens.
Not at all.
Okay, thank you. At this point, we'll move on to see if any commissioners have further questions of staff. And like I said, I have a few very specific questions about some of the statements made here and some of the qualifications, and also some thoughts about some of the zoning and design issues. And I think now's the appropriate time to get into that. So does anybody want to start with some questions? Looks like Commissioner Yoder's going to launch.
Thank you. So this would be directed towards Chris. So this is on page 3 of 16 or 3 of 17 with the new edition, and it's regarding the traffic impact analysis that was done. I was wondering, did that traffic, I'm going to assume that the TIA at the time did not include Boulevard Apartments and the 19th Street Oak Creek Apartments. Is that true, or do you know?
I don't know on the timing, but due to the proximity, I don't know they would have been included or impacted the TIA that would have been performed on the timing. I have to look at the years on when it was done, but they're not in the same proximity or area of town.
wouldn't the traffic impact analysis look at some of the major intersections? Like, would it go as far north as Main Street for something on south near Chapel?
It would look at Chapel. I don't know that it would go as far as looking at Main Street. But again, in this case, there's no, it doesn't meet the trigger to require a new transportation impact analysis,
So
which is based on number of new trips that would be generated by the modification.
and we're using those trips as the potentially 194 dwellings. That's also listed on page 3 of 16. And if unless I misunderstood earlier, that the homes potentially that will be coming in on North Timothy that were not addressed really clearly anywhere, not that I saw. Maybe the other commissioners saw it. An additional 20, 30 homes potentially could be put there. And wouldn't that kind of cause a trigger?
So the trigger is more than 200 vehicle trips on any given street.
And a potential 200 trips, a potential, let's see, an extra 60 homes from the original plan would not be enough to trigger it, assuming people have 2 cars and
Right. Yeah, we estimate about 10 trips per day for a single family residential. It's slightly less than that for townhomes. It's like 0.7.
wait, sure, I don't have my calculator here in front of me, but it seems like from going up to 166 to 194 and then adding all of the homes on Timothy could potentially be a trigger, but I just found out about the homes on Timothy.
I'll suggest that that's something we can talk about in deliberations.
Okay, thank
At
you.
this time, ask a question, get an answer, then we'll get those
Move
answers
on.
and then talk more. Commissioner Sullivan.
Sorry about that. Apparently my unmute shortcut is giving me grief. So Chris, this question's for you. The changes that are being proposed here, if the developer had originally conceived of a project with the additional homes and the townhomes and the park in the different location, and basically everything that's in this document, if that had been the original proposal, would we simply not be having this discussion at this time, and it was just bad luck that they happened to sort of change their minds or whatever? Or is there anything special or extra that's kind of being granted at this kind of mid junction point, if you see what I'm saying? Is it just literally just a change in the numbers and there's no other special exceptions, and it's just timing? Or is there something else that we're kind of giving away or acquiescing to here? I don't know, that's a bad word for it.
Are you speaking specific to the traffic and impact analysis? Or are you talking?
Oh,
more
no,
generally?
not the, sorry, completely different subject, not the traffic and impact analysis.
So, yeah, I mean, so there was I guess I'm still not clear on the question. I mean, they've got a subdivision approval, and then the code allows for a property owner developer to modify that approval. And so that's what they've applied is for the modification. So that's what the staff report is reviewing, is any of those changes. A change could have been, we're altering a street from this location. We're going to move it 20 feet to the east, right? That would be an alteration or modification. The previous modification that was determined to be a minor modification was just changing the phasing. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 4, 5. So they just changed the direction. That didn't add new properties. It didn't fit the definition of a major modification because it didn't add additional properties. It didn't change transportation patterns. All that stuff didn't trigger. And so it was a minor modification, which was approved as kind of a type 2 approval. This is a type 3 where it is coming back to the planning commission because there's significant enough changes that it meets the criteria as a major modification. So that's what the review is trying to focus on, but because the changes are substantial, it's basically a full review.
Yeah, thank you for that. I understand why it's a major modification and a full review. The question has more to do with whether or not the changes are represent something other than a change. So if my neighbor says, you know, I don't know, you know, hey, I'm going to paint my mailbox red. And I say, sure, that sounds great. And then later the neighbor says, actually, it's blue. I'm going to say, okay, well, you're still painting it some color. If instead he says, you know, I'm going to replace my mailbox with, you know, a rusty car, that's just a fundamentally different thing. And it feels like this change, although it's a major modification, is mostly just changing the number and sizes and kind of rearranging the pieces, but it's still foundationally a big development with some big houses and some smaller houses and some roads and things like that. Is there anything else that I'm missing? I guess maybe it's probably a dumber question than you think it is.
No, I get it. I think I've got where you're coming from. So I guess I would say, had the applicant submitted this application in 2018, and this was the layout that they submitted in 2018, it would have gone through a very similar review process. You know, to Commissioner Yoder's point on the traffic impact analysis, that impact analysis might look a little bit different. You know, the numbers are going to be a little bit higher because you have a few more homes. I'm not a traffic engineer, but the way that the code reads, if it's not a significant number of new dwelling units, the conclusion would be that you're not going to trigger any on-site or off-site traffic control devices, right? It's not going to warrant a stoplight at Chapel Drive that it otherwise would. Now, you know, if you were added 400 houses, then obviously that would trigger a new traffic impact analysis, because you do, you know, that probably would trigger some stop signs, some stop lights, maybe some deceleration lanes and that type of thing. But the argument for not doing the impact analysis different from the original one that was already done is that those mitigations probably aren't going to be any different for just a small increase of 200 trips per day on that street. So, but I guess to more fully answer your question, you're not really missing anything. The only thing I would add is that to be the biggest issue, this is me professionally as with the planning experience that I do have, which is limited to being in Philomath. I think the biggest thing was that when the applicant applied for high density residential in this area for the R3 zoning, that was allowed in order to have smaller lots, because the intent was to get more lots on any given street to try to reduce the cost and to provide for, you know, smaller homes, smaller lots that could sell for less money. And as it was a big deal at the time that a condition of approval be put on there that we were going to rezone the R3, but it wasn't to become a large apartment complex, right? We didn't want to kind of the rope-a-dope, like, hey, give us the high density residential, we're going to put these nice houses in there, you give the approval, and now we're going to put a big apartment complex in there. And so that's why the development agreement was required, and the development agreement specified single family residential only, no multifamily, you know, and it was very clear. It also required, if you'll recall, the setback from the garage to the street was 40 feet long instead of the standard 20 feet long. That was because with houses so close together, there's no place for your visitors to park, and we didn't want parking on the street to become an issue. So, you know, up and above the condition was, okay, if you're going to do R3 and you're going to do these narrow lots, then we're going to add some additional provisions, like much longer driveways. So you've got room for 4 vehicles on that driveway instead of just the 2. And anything more than 2 is going to end up fighting for spots on the street. So to me, the biggest issue is that development agreement, which limited development of this R3 zone to single family residential. That's the biggest shift, and the biggest change was, you know, if we were to have looked at this in 2018 and he applied for an R3 zone to allow for single family and duplexes, would the city council at the time would have approved that? I don't know. But the fact is, it is zoned R3. It was a condition of approval of the development agreement in place, but that's, to me, the biggest decision for the planning commission is it's zoned R3. The allowed use would allow for duplexes, would allow for townhomes. Is the planning commission comfortable with allowing for a change in the development agreement in order to allow for higher density than what was originally approved. That's the big crutch of it for me. I don't foresee traffic being a big issue. The park moving and some of the facilities changing a little bit to me isn't as big of issue. But it's really an issue of, is the planning commission comfortable with higher density than what was originally approved when the zone change was granted from industrial to R3, high density residential?
Thank you. That exactly answers my question.
Great.
Okay, I have a few questions now, unless Ruth or Peggy, you have something very specific to follow up on what we've already been discussing.
Why don't you go ahead, Gary, and I'll
All right,
hold my questions.
thanks. So I see one statement on page 5 under L, fire access. It says buildings are limited to 30 feet in height. But I believe I read something in our zoning code that in R3, the buildings could be up to 40 feet.
Yeah, so in R3, you can go up to 40 feet, which that's your 3-story apartment complex, right?
Right.
But for the vision, try to limit that and to not allow that to go crazy, limit it to 30 feet, that gets you a 2-story building, a 2-story townhome, a 2-story single-family home. But you wouldn't be able to do a large 3-story unit of some sort on this. To me, a 3-story dwelling unit on this property would seem uncharacteristic for the neighborhood as it's currently laid out, and I think for the vision of what we'd want in this area.
Okay, so with that being an additional constraint, it probably should also be listed in the back for recommended conditions of approval?
Or it could be captured in the development agreement itself.
Okay. Okay.
Which is probably the more appropriate place for it, is in the development agreement.
Okay. And then as far as this approval right now, I'm guessing that some of the statements in here, we don't really have to worry about whether the information that's been presented really complies with all of these statements. I was thinking about like turnaround for fire trucks at the back of the private lanes. It doesn't look like, and maybe it can be accomplished with the way it's done, but if for some reason this layout doesn't accomplish that with this provision, it will be required to accomplish that.
Yeah, so the plot approval is 2-part. There's a draft, there's an original, and then there's a final. That original, it gets submitted, gets reviewed kind of cursory from the engineer. But it's very common that once the engineer is doing the full review, that you find things have to be tweaked and adjusted. Those get tweaked, adjusted, and a final plat is submitted. And there's some science and a little bit of art in comparing the original plat versus the final plat and how significant any of those changes are. If they're minor changes, that gets approved. If they're significant, then we would look at it and sometimes even require a minor modification application to be submitted and a full staff report to be done to show what those changes were. But most of the time, the changes are either specifically called out or they're minor enough that they're kind of close enough for what was approved.
Okay. So things like providing the parking spaces near the park, they're going to have to do something to lay out the parking that's clearly park parking as opposed to just street parking in front of townhouses that's going to be taken up by other people, right?
Correct. Yeah, they did submit a park layout. Did you see that in the packet?
I did not.
Look at my packet.
But regardless of that, that park layout would go through the Parks Committee before it would be final approved, right?
Right.
Great. I would be interested to see that if we could, but maybe not right now. It's probably not critical to our decision.
Yeah, I'll apologize. I'm looking at my packet and I don't see that it made it in here.
Okay.
It should have been on the back side of the other, of the phase plan. So yeah, that was my mistake. I apologize.
Okay.
I'd be happy to show it if you're curious.
Yeah, I think people would be interested to see it.
Do you want to do that now?
Yeah, please.
it gives a little bit better view of Timothy Street as well, what that could look like.
Okay.
There you go. So this is Bullback Street, and then this would be 17th coming up. And then this is where Timothy Street currently stubs out. There's a home here. This is lot 40, and the conditions of approval, it specifically called out that this would need to be shortened down to this property line so that Timothy could continue through. And so the idea would be that Timothy would continue through and connect in here, similar to the original plan.
And where are the north-south drain lines?
Those run here.
Okay.
And so rather than having a stub out here, this would be a 10-foot wide bike ped path that would feed up this way and connect into this path.
Okay.
That would give the city access over that storm line. And so, you know, you're not going to have a house directly here. You're going to have an easement for the storm here. So you'll have this space. And then I'm not sure exactly where it ties in up here to Willow. But you'll have a gap in housing along the north side too for that drainage line to feed underneath.
Yeah. And
you can see that the primary aspect, I can kind of zoom in here a little bit, of the park is really going to be down here. And I think I've got these memorized. I think this is a hard surface, like a basketball court, sports court of some sort. This was a larger kids playground. This was like a tot playground. This is a smaller version where the Levi's agreed to put public restrooms and a larger kind of covering pavilion area and a couple of picnic tables. So the primary use of the park, and then of course you've got the parking, the bike rack. So the primary use of the parking will be here.
Yeah.
Track depth is the glaring question. The staff report refers to this. This will be a detention. It'll be depressed grass kind of filled area that'll be wet in the winter and dry out in the summer.
And maybe some 2-hour parking signs on those parking spots or something.
Yeah, that was a question that was raised. Yeah, we definitely need to put some signage, parking only. And I would imagine the neighborhood will do some self-enforcement there.
The next question I have is on the layout of the townhomes. If you look at that block between Crosscut and 18th, that's just a complete dense package of townhomes. I'm kind of surprised that maybe we don't have any requirements for like gaps and green spaces and other sorts of things. Is there like a maximum size?
Yeah, so I can speak to this a little bit, and it's a little bit hard to envision, but you'll notice that every 8th lot is a little bit wider.
Yeah.
And so as you're doing an 8-plex, these will be together. You will have required side yard in between each of these. So this would be an 8-plex that'd have side yard here.
Okay.
And it'd go to here. You'll have a 5-foot setback and then another 5-foot setback. So you'll have 10-foot gap between buildings here, and then the same thing here. And then of course you'll have a buffer between the side of the building and the corners 15 feet. So it won't be a solid wall. You will have some gaps as well as front yard.
But we talk about the backyards, but the driveways are also going through that space. So if they're 30 some feet wide and 18 of that is a driveway, there's like 12 feet or something left for yards.
Yeah, so on the front yards, and sorry, so here's Bullback Street. I was kind of pointing to backyard. So here's Bullback. So the street frontages, the way these are designed, the house will front up here. That's a minimum 10-foot setback from the property line.
Okay.
And then it will be the unit. There'll be area for yard, and then on the backside they'll have a single car garage and then a 2-car driveway essentially. So you have 3 parking spaces, single car garage and 2 parking spaces. And you're right, along the back there's going to be a lot of cement along the back. In addition to the roadway, you'll have parking all along here on the back side of those. But from the public view, as you're driving through, you're going to see the frontage of the homes, and the backside is just more of a issue of hopefully not everybody's coming and going at the exact same time.
And how does the street tree code lay out there? Because if you had one tree for every unit, that'd be pretty tight.
Yeah, I think the new code's a tree every 50 feet. And so you just measure that out along the front. There is no street tree requirement along the backside. And then obviously along the park, we would have trees.
Okay.
Did anyone else have any specific questions on this while I've got it up, or do you want me to go ahead and close out? Looks like there's a couple.
Yeah, Commissioner Rose.
I apologize again, this didn't make it into the packet, but yeah, as noted, this will go to the Park Advisory Board for review and final approval.
Thank you.
Okay, shall I go now?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, when I'm looking at this diagram, the houses down there that are bordering Bullback Street, they actually are the garages are also actually at the bottom of they're on Bullback Street.
No, on this one. No, on this one, this would be the frontage on Bullback, and there'll be rear access as well. So this will be the privately owned and maintained drive, and that's where they'll take access, is from the back.
Yeah, all the garages are from the private drives.
Okay, well, that doesn't really agree with the drawing, most recent drawing we got. The little diamonds indicate the garages.
Yeah, those are all backwards. No, they're not all backwards. The ones on Crosscut, west of Crosscut, they're in the right place.
You're looking at this one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, basically I was kind of having trouble visualizing where the fronts of the houses were going to be when the garages, especially on Crosscut Lane on the east side of the road. If their garages are on Crosscut Lane, then the front of their houses are on that detention pond side.
So I believe that the legend is just that just identifies that it has a rear access garage, not necessarily where the garage is going to be located. It looks like the diamond just got placed where it could be seen, but just in reading this, it just identifies that it's a rear access lot, not necessarily where the garage is going to go.
So 100% of the garages are from the private lane.
On all of the townhomes, yes.
All the townhomes.
That's what's been applied for.
Great.
Okay, well, that makes more sense then.
Even on Crosscut, same thing. They'll have a private access along the back here, and then they'll have a private access between the two here.
Okay. I also had a question about the bike ped path that goes through. Will there be lighting on that?
They'll along Chapel Drive.
No, along the in the park area, there's the path that runs. There's I wish I could point at something.
Between 16th and Tract F. Right.
The where the detention pond is in the park, and then just to the east of that, there's supposed to be a bike ped path that goes through the park along that area.
So there's no requirement for it. That's something the Planning Commission could look at. There's nothing in I have to go back and look. That actually may be a detail in the design standards that requires that those surfaces are lit. We've gone back and forth with that when you're talking about trails that are internal in a park. because we really try not to encourage people to be in the parks after dark. And one way to encourage people to be there is to put lights up. And so, Public Works kind of goes back and forth with that. We've intentionally not installed lights around the loop at like City Park or at Mary's River Park. That's been intentional. But on something like this where it's crossing through, it may make more sense. But that if the commission wanted to make specific direction there, I think that'd be appropriate as a condition of approval. But it may be more appropriate or maybe left up at the engineering level for staff to the city engineer and the public works director to have some insight as to whether they would want to see lighting on that pathway or not.
Okay.
I'm comfortable either way. There's pros and cons.
Okay, thank you. I think we're at Counselor Causey was probably next. And I see Gianna and Joseph.
Thank you. And Chris, thank you for putting this up. You actually answered one of my questions. On the backside of the townhomes where the driveways are, is there any kind of a green strip or grass strip between driveways, or is it just all concrete?
There'll be a little space, but not a lot. No.
Okay.
My assumption would be if there's space, I don't envision a lot of people planting grass. It'll probably be a hardscape or a bark dust with some plantings or something like that. I don't envision a lot of lawn because it'll be so narrow.
Okay. My other question is there a condition of approval that will address Mr. Kramer's concern about the ditch on Timothy? Or is that part of the work that was going to be done in phase 3?
That is part of the phase 3. So the ditch that's going in with phase 3, right now it's an open ditch. The requirement will be that'll be where the 2 large storm pipes will go. Those need to be installed and covered, and that pass-through's got to be approved by Benton County and by the city's engineer. We've got to have a storm track in place before we can get rid of the one that we have existing on Timothy. So that'll all take place as part of phase 3.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. The only caveat I would put there, and again, I don't want to put the county on the spot, the only caveat there would be if the open ditch was approved as a temporary measure, we might be able to fill in Timothy while the open ditch is connected. But again, that's kind of engineering level discussion that I don't feel very qualified to be talking about. So it could come sooner, but at the very latest, it would be when that full storm pipe system is installed and operational.
I guess one sort of hypothetical question, would it be possible to angle Timothy upward into the right so it doesn't kind of cut through the middle of the park?
I think the intent was to follow the original outline, which I think is pretty straight across. One of the considerations is the angle that you're coming into 17th Street at. But again, we haven't seen how that's designed yet, so it's a little bit up in the air. But the other consideration is how much space you've got here for yards. And you've got a lot right here that's kind of that width, so you can't go too much further. You won't have enough space for a yard.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner Bernardini.
Yeah. I do wish that we had maybe had has anybody seen this townhome idea with the with all of the driveways in a row? Is there an example of that somewhere? Like, I'm trying to visualize what that's going to look like. It sounds pretty rough, like just nothing but driveways abutting a street. I don't know. I have some concerns. That sounds kind of horrible. in general, I like this idea. I like the density of it, but that aspect seems
I would
unpleasant.
I'd like to discuss that when we get to deliberations.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so my question for you, Chris, about Timothy Street going through. I guess I don't think I'm understanding why that seems so important, seeing as how it's not like there is no possible way to get to 17th without it. I mean, you simply go down a little bit. You go down 16th, cut over on Bullback, and there you are on 17th. I mean, granted, if Timothy went straight, I suppose you're saving, a few feet. But given that if you do take Timothy Street the way it was originally and cut it through, if you look at, thank you, by the way, for the map with the park, that was really helpful. But if you look at that, if Timothy Street goes across there, not only are you cutting through that park, you're also losing, that substantially reduces the size of the park. I guess I'm not clear on why it's so important to have that road there.
Yeah, maybe I could share a screen again on the map. This is a Benton County GIS map. That's a kind of a little bit bigger picture, and maybe that'll help explain. So here's Applegate up here. Here's 13th Street. Here's 15th Street. So here's phase 1, Chapel, and then here's 19th Street. Here's 17th Street, and it dead ends right here now. And so 17th Street will continue down. When you look at the amount of space you've got going north and south, and then you look at how do you get from, east to west and west to east, by not having Timothy Street go through, yeah, ideally it'd be nice to go all the way through 19th Street, but there's a property in the way. But at least getting it through to 17th Street, which can come through, gives you that additional connectivity piece that, again, without it, all the traffic is coming all the way down to Chapel, or all the traffic is going up to Applegate. You're not getting any of this cross-through connectivity piece, which is vital, not just for, saving 3 or 4 minutes to get to school, but for fire, life, and safety type issues. It's a major concern. I think Benton County's code is, you're not supposed to have more than 600 feet of uninterrupted area. You've got to have that cross street every 600 feet. And without Timothy going through, 17th would be a clear violation of that. It's just real quick. That's 11, just under 1,200 feet. So putting Timothy through helps. It's not perfect still, but it definitely would help.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, thanks. So I've got a couple questions for Chris. First, a comment on the lights. In my experience, when you have a large group of people living together, you've got kids and you've got pets, and everybody who doesn't have a kid ends up with a pet, vice versa. Maybe people have kids and pets. At any rate, around here in the winter, it gets dark around 5. Most kids seem to go to bed around 8, and the last walking of the dog for the night happens around 10. And my thought is that if you have a park near a bunch of people and the park is not lit, then you'll have a bunch of people walking around with flashlights and kind of bumping into things. And if it's lit, then they'll have some light. And so my instinct is you should probably put some lights in the park. Just my thought. On the more important subjects, I feel like the city is essentially being asked for a favor, because this level of density wasn't really envisioned in the original application. And the developers essentially saying a bunch of stuff went sideways. I need to see some more money out of this thing. So I want to push a bunch more houses in there. That's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Density can be good in a lot of ways because it keeps from using up more land and things like that. The real key, I think we can all agree, is that density just needs to be done right. If it's done right, everybody's happy, it still looks nice, and you get the advantages of the density without the downsides of density. So the question on my mind is whether or not this is going to be done right. And most of us know that the best indicator of future performance is past performance. Unfortunately, it does seem like there are a fair few people who are unhappy with the past performance on this project. I don't really understand all those reasons, but it's not a very encouraging thing just to hear that. I know that there are some people that are happy with it, but they seem like they might be employees and things. I know if I were putting this together, I would definitely want to provide affordable housing for my employees, and then anyone else who moved in can pay full price. That's how I would do it. That's really neither here nor there. But when we're talking about essentially saying, okay, you know what, go ahead and make this thing even more dense than we originally planned. My concerns are, number one, that let's say the project continues to go sideways and the Millers pull out and it gets sold to someone. Are we kind of grandfathering in this next developer who might come in instead of the Millers, and now they've got permission essentially to build townhouses and to have these extended number of houses, and it's just basically kind of an exit? Or is there any way we could put in a restriction saying this approval only applies to the existing developer? So that's question number one. The second thing is, can you suggest any ways we might address the unhappy people as a condition of approval? I understand that it would have to be done in an intelligent way because there's always going to be somebody who's unhappy, and you can't just say make everyone happy or nothing will ever get done. But maybe to address some of the kind of more headlining concerns. And then the last question, and I know this is kind of a pile for you there, Chris, and I apologize, but you're kind of, one of our experts here. The last question is, Benton County Public Works was clearly asking for something or suggesting something. And I'm curious what that is. Are they kind of hinting that maybe we should put a condition of approval that they fix the problem with the runoff? So 3 different questions about 3 different potential conditions. The first one is making it so the approval we're contemplating only extends to Miller. The second one, how to make more people happy. And then the third one, the Benton County issue. Apologies for all of that.
No problem. Yeah, the approval limited to, this approval is going to be based on this subdivision approval. Mr. Miller, any owner could turn around and sell the property, and the same land use approval is what's approved. So, if somebody else were to buy this property and want to do something different, they're going to be submitting a modification application and coming back in front of you to convince you why they should be allowed to do something different, right? Or that what they want to do different is meeting the criteria of the code, right? So you can't put a condition of approval that it's only allowed by this owner. But what is being submitted with this application, which includes the plot plan, the phasing plan, the rendering that shows the type of building. Now, we're not going to hold to the T as, exactly where that tree goes in the rendering, but the style of the building, that's part of his application. And so if anything gets submitted that's substantially different than that, then that's when staff blows the whistle and says, whoa, this is the rendering that you submitted. What you're now proposing is completely different. That's not acceptable. So what you are approving is what has been submitted, and the developer, regardless of who the developer is, the developer won't be able to stray from what's been submitted, within some fairly short parameters, right? There's a little bit of wiggle room there, but not very much. As far as unhappy folks, I guess I just turned to condition of approval number 2. Tried to address that. It reads, all phase 2 and phase 2B improvements shall be completed, and the final plat shall be recorded prior to issuing a permit for construction of public improvements for phase 3. So phase 2B is the houses on the east side of 16th Street. Phase 2 obviously is the west side of 16th Street. There's some lot lines that need to be adjusted. There's some other things that need to be done. So, I guess I would say it's not like this gets approved and we're going to start building this tomorrow. There's still quite a bit of work that needs to be done in phase 2. There's some work that needs to be done in phase 2B. And then in phase 3 is when you'll start to see like, oh, there's actually some new infrastructure going in the ground, would be phase 3. Then none of that infrastructure in the ground, phase 3, is going to happen until phase 2 and 2B have been taken care of. And the goal of that is to make sure that people that are unhappy for, you know, I totally get it. I've been listening to complaints for 2 years of people calling and complaining because they didn't get into their house when they were told they were going to get into their house. That's really, really frustrating. I understand that, but that's not a reason that you deny a future application for land use, right? It stinks and you kind of get it, but it's not part of the criteria on which, you know, grounds for denying an application is because people aren't happy with past performance. So we go into it cautiously. We put conditions of approval in place to protect the city and future residents. But really, I think that's the best way to do it. So if there's an additional condition of approval or something that's more specific, we could point to it, but we got to make sure we can measure it, right? It can't just be everybody's happy with the subdivision. That's not going to cut it. So if there's something measurable, we could put in there more specific than number 2. I'd be open to that. But that was the intent. And then for Benton County, I think, again, looking at the conditions of approval that Benton County submitted, those are pretty specific. If they're complying with those conditions of approval, Benton County is going to be happy with where the subdivision ends up. Gordon's got me the nod, so I'm not over speaking that. So those were specifically drafted to make sure that the things that Benton County is not currently satisfied with do get corrected as this project moves forward. How'd I do, Joseph?
I did great. Thank you.
And I don't disagree with you on the lighting. The current city policy is that we don't put lights in parks, that parks close at dusk. There's safety reasons, there's all kinds of reasons for that. But again, that's a park versus public works versus enjoyment of the facilities kind of question, right? But the current stance is that all city parks close at dusk right now.
Sounds like a good discussion for the Parks Committee, and we might have some parks that have different policies.
Yeah, and bikeways and pathways, you know, Van Hunsicker bikeway pathway, we installed lights there several years ago. So there's exceptions. It's like I said, it's worth the conversation. I just don't know that if we want to add it for a condition of approval, we can, but really it's something that'll kind of get vetted out.
So I would like to see if we can wrap up any remaining, you know, just pure questions for staff, and then allow the rebuttal and have another break before we move on to deliberations. So I see that Van has his hand up. So if anybody has any more, please.
Well, and I don't know if this is the right place for it. When I was looking at the staff report, there were here and there's places there that it mentions about conditions of approval, but they didn't turn into conditions of approval. So I guess my question would be, if I give you, there's like 3 or 4 of them, if you could say, well, that should be a condition of approval or not, and then, or is that better for later? I guess is the only question I have.
That's probably better after deliberation, but if you want to prepare those and we can go through those, absolutely.
Okay, I'll wait.
Great. Any other final questions before we have a rebuttal? Looks like no. So we will now move on to rebuttals, beginning with the applicant rebuttal of any information raised during the public testimony. I will remind the applicant that new information in support of the application may not be introduced during the rebuttal. Does the applicant wish to rebut any testimony at this time? And Mr. Miller, are you there?
I'm here. Sorry, technology.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, basically the theme of all the, long story short, I don't think you can find a single project that is told to stop work immediately on new permits. Stop, if you can finish up what you have under permit, but stop everything else. I don't think you can find a project anywhere in Oregon, Benton County, Philomath, the United States for that matter, that could basically be told to stop like we were told to stop and not have unhappy people or not have the site look like our site did. I mean, we literally were told to stop. We stopped. Obviously, if it wasn't for the methane and we had been able to roll right into phase 3, I think all the stuff that you heard from that letter from Trevor wouldn't even come up. While I completely understand his frustrations, I'm frustrated too. You know, I had no desire to stop work last May. Our goal was to roll right into phase 3. So had we been able to roll right into phase 3 development, we would have got that storm system installed. That ditch along Willow Lane would have been filled in. Obviously, Gordon Kurtz, you know, concerns with the piles, and you guys, I mean, those piles are there because we were told to stop working. We couldn't touch those piles. We couldn't do anything with those piles. So a lot of these frustrations and happiness is simply because I could not do any work. Obviously, as soon as we get approvals and get permits and get back at it, we will address these things as quickly as we can. But when I'm unable to do any work, it's really hard to take care of those things. As far as going back to Trevor's comment, you know, that I blew him off today at noon, you know, unfortunately, there is a lot going on in my life. I had a prior commitment that I forgot about. It was at noon today. I had a meeting with the power company, Pacific Power, and PBS, my consultants. We addressed, it's been a meeting that we've been trying to schedule for the last month and a half at DEQ's requirement. So unfortunately, you know, Trevor's meeting had to get postponed because having 5 people from Pacific Power, 2 of my consultants and me trying to schedule a meeting, unfortunately took precedence over Trevor. So that wasn't me at lunch saying, screw it, I'm gonna meet this guy. That was me trying to deal with the power company and DEQ's concerns with the methane. So, you know, again, Trevor's concerns are extremely valid. The communication has been rough. Like I said, you know, we have been working on, you know, getting communication better. And of course, the biggest hurdle has just been obviously not being able to work. Lori's letter, I met with her on Friday. I would like to read a Facebook post she did. It's a public post, so I feel confident that I can read it. This is what she posted last Friday. Floma folks, I had an excellent conversation this morning with Levi Miller, the contractor for this complicated project. I had written a fairly strong letter of concern to the city about Millpond Crossing, and he contacted me to discuss the issues. Levi convinced me that he has a strong plan for the future. He also impressed me as someone who is working for the community as well as his business. If you're interested in talking with him, let me know or just contact him through Messenger. He says that he's open to meeting with people one-on-one or in small groups, in addition to the public meeting next Tuesday. So that's just in response to Lori's letter. Gordon Kurtz, you know, I don't know if that was, there's a lot I want to say, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut. At the end of the day, the reason why we don't have a permit for the stormwater for phase 3 is that we're in the process of getting that approved when we were told to stop work. So we stopped that design because we weren't sure when the project would start again. We weren't sure the project would even look like. So of course we don't have the stormwater permit for phase 3 because we have not revised it yet, because again, we don't even know what phase 3 is gonna look like based on this meeting. So, and then as far as, you know, the other stuff, you know, again, when I'm told to stop work, it was an abrupt stop of work. It wasn't a planned thing. It wasn't a, hey, you know, let's take care of this. It was, you're done working. You were not going to give more permits, you know, stop. So had I not been told to stop and I had been allowed to proceed with going into phase 3 as planned, 99% of the issues that you guys are talking about, people being unhappy, those would not exist. They only exist because I was told to stop and was not able to go into phase 3, which would have tied up all these loose ends.
Okay.
And then the park, I'll just jump in the park. We have formed an internal park committee with the residents of Millpond Crossing. So we are working with the Millpond Crossing residents to, you know, come up with their own ideas that we're going to submit to the planning, the park board. So we're getting Millpond Crossing residents' input. We're going to present that to the park board. So the park that was presented tonight was more of a schematic. Let's throw what's required in just to see what it looks like. The park design that you've seen tonight is by no means the final design, and we're still working with the residents of Millpond Crossing if they want, obviously adding in the city's requirements, and then we'll present that to the park board at a later future. So the park is definitely a giant work in process. And then last but not least, as far as me, wanting to add lots, this is a favor. Again, I have an approved subdivision. I don't have to be here. I have opened myself up to public comments. This meeting is not comfortable. I did not have to do this. I could sell the subdivision. I could finish subdivision as is approved, sell the lots, make money, and move on. This is to complete the mission for affordability. So this is not me trying to double my lots, trying to double my profit. This is trying to continue to sell homes at an affordable price. I have the option to do the subdivision as it's approved, sell them for whatever I want for, and move on. That is the more profitable approach for me. This townhome approach is not the more profitable approach. This townhome approach is simply a way to spread my cost out so I can continue to provide the homes at the cheapest price I can so people can get in that otherwise cannot.
Okay, thank you. Does any proponent wish to rebut any testimony? And I believe we just had two of those present. I don't know if they're still here, but give them another 2 seconds to find their unmute button. And if they don't, I think we'll move on. There were not any opponents physically present. I did not hear any requests for continuance or to hold the record open. As such, does the applicant waive a 7-day period to submit a final written argument?
I do.
Thank you. Deliberations, it's 9 o'clock. I would like to move on to deliberations. I'm thinking we have another 5-minute break here in a couple of minutes and then have some discussions. So at least begin the deliberations here in a few minutes, unless someone has a strong objection. I'm not seeing any hands.
Chair Connor, I don't have an objection. I just want to make sure that you close the public hearing is all.
Yes, that's the next thing after we talk about when we are going to have the deliberations. So since we're having deliberations next, that's when we're having them in 5 minutes. And now the public hearing is now closed. So let's be back here a little before 9:15 and we'll start talking about it. Thank you very much.